this could be interesting. This can be interesting. Let's see what Preach has got to say. Let me know if it's not loud enough or if it's too loud or whatnot. And we'll just see how we go. The Legacy... Hold on, I should probably... So, The Legacy of MMO Dungeons by Preach Gaming. Whoever that guy is. I always got to link the video before the video starts, and then I've got to give it a little thumbs up, even if we don't know if we're ever going to like it or not yet, but we give it a thumbs up anyway. I'm already subscribed to the channel. No one can yell at me. Let's go, baby. On the streets of Manchester. A dangerous place. Preach's office is looking in better shape.
It's time to jam.
Run, Mike, run! Mike, run!
You know, ever since we've been going on digital adventures, there's been one thing that's the focal point, whether we've been a sword-wielding laser master or some sort of wizard casting spells, and that is the dungeons. Let's ask ourselves, what is a dungeon for? Why are we so excited about them in our fantasy?
Which FF is this? This is Endwalker, isn't it? FF7? Bruh. I kind of wish I looked like Cloud, man. He looks like he's been hitting the gym in areas.
Games. Stories and narrative are a huge factor. Look at the dead mines in World of Warcraft, uncovering the secrets of Edwin Van Cleef and his Defias, or the vaults in FF14, encroaching on the Heavens Ward and...
Oh!
No spoilers.
No spoilers!
No, that's a bounce. Too much.
Oh, that was the spoiler that you warned me about in chat. Ooh, the vaults in Heaven's Ward. Ooh, I have no idea what that means. Okay, we'll see. Sorry, let me just skip back a sec.
No spoilers. Now that's a bounce. Too much role-playing and players get frustrated on repeat playthroughs. Look at the pain caused by Trial of the Crusader in Wrath of the Lich King. Because apparently, the devs thought, at the time, standing around for 2.5 minutes doing absolutely nothing every time you went into the dungeon was really engaging gameplay. Not just the story, though. It's about the loot.
Yeah, I think it's really weird. So, this is an interesting thing that I have about, like, really quick before Mike gets into it, but an interesting thought that I have about dungeons is, like, not every, like, there should be dungeons that are story dungeons, because ultimately what are dungeons trying to do? They're trying to progress the story, but give you some kind of combat, instanced scenario stuff. And there's some good loot there, and there's some bosses and stuff like that. But there could be some really good RP, but you don't want the RP when you're doing it at the high level. When you're doing it at, like, say there's, like, criterions. You don't want to be doing a criterion or WoW Mythic Plus, and there's some RP pop in, and you've got to stop and listen to some person telling you some shit. And you're like, yeah, I've heard this 20 times, and also, can you not do this in my, you know, difficult content dungeon? Can you keep them separate? You either need to separate the RP when you do it on the difficult version, or do dungeons do story dungeons and difficult content dungeons separately, which is a lot of extra dev time. But I don't know, bro. Figure it out.
Dungeons contain those big, shiny items. They give you massive experience, huge quest turn-ins. So needless to say, dungeons are a very big deal, and players want them. But game dungeons have come a long way over the years. And it turns out that the people who made the original dungeons in MMOs didn't really know what to make in the first place. So today, my friends, we are going on an adventure to the past. We're going to look at where the MMO dungeons came from, where they're ultimately going, and what makes the perfect MMO dungeon.
Oh, back in Manchester. Okay. Careful, Mike. Don't start a wildfire, brother. The worst thing with like story, like RP, when you're doing a dungeon, going into Neltharian's lair in WoW. If you go into Neltharian's lair in WoW, it's like Dark Rule, blah 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 blah, and the speech thing like pops up and covers my action bars, and I can't, and I have to like go and right click it. Meanwhile, I've got to dodge like 4 frontals and shit, and like interrupts and stuff, and I've got to like click this RP off. Like, why is this happening, bro? Yeah, London Studio. Yeah, this is gonna be me trying to get to FanFest next week. Jesus. Dark Rule, check out that noise.
All right, first things first. How big should a dungeon be? How long should it take in an MMO?
Ooh.
Those of you who've played like the original World of Warcraft or Classic will realize and probably notice that the first dungeons that came with the game were very different than what came after. And that's including before the Burning Crusade.
Yeah.
You see, the people who made World of Warcraft had to design the dungeons on what they knew and what they thought was cool. And in order to find out what that was, we're gonna have to go back to the 1990s.
Yeah, it's gonna be D&D, huh? Dungeons and Dragons. That's gonna be
in the first MMOs
Start,
like
I think,
EverQuest
right?
back in '99 by Daybreak, they had to design their dungeons based on what they knew, but they didn't have much in the virtual world to draw on. What they did have though were board games. Take what you see in your head during those massive sessions.
What did I say? D&D, tabletops, baby. That's where the first dungeons are coming from.
Of D&D, and then make that in the virtual world. For example, the first dungeons weren't even instanced. 5 years ago, John Statz wrote a book called The WoW Diary. And who's he, might you ask? Well, he's the guy who built
I want to
many
get
of the
this.
areas.
Hold on, I want to get that. It's the WoW Diary. I've heard about this before. It's like, so over 100 never before seen images from the development of WoW, 300 plus beautiful pages detailing the process for creating the largest MMO ever. Behind the curtain look at interpersonal experiences working at Blizzard. Each copy comes with 80-page post-mortem booklet of essays expanding on philosophies covered in the WoW Diary. Wow. I really want to get that. I've looked at this before and I want to get it. But okay.
Might you ask? Well, he's the guy who built many of the areas that you guys love in World of Warcraft. Outdoor areas, raids, dungeons, including the infamous and everyone's favorite, Wailing Caverns.
Yes.
In the book, he explains that he spent so long building Wailing Caverns, based only on the information, right, that it would be a cave with dinosaurs in it. Go wild. So he spends all his time building it. Then he goes to his boss, Jeff Kaplan, and he says, here you go, here's Wailing Caverns, to which Jeff says, cool, now you can start building the dungeon. It turns out he'd just been making the waiting area, and the instance portal originally was supposed to be the front of the cave, but now it was going to be at the back of the cave. So John goes back to his PC, right, and starts making more and more dungeon. And every time he turns his work in, his boss Jeff Kaplan tells him to go bigger.
Jeff Kaplan is sick, by the way. Have you guys seen him with like when he was working on Overwatch and stuff? He's so good. He's one of those devs who he's like an old school dev. Where he cuts through the bullshit. He's not got any of that PR talk. He just comes in and he'll do all the community memes. Like for me, Jeff Kaplan is like a Yoshi P. You know what I mean? Like he's that kind of guy where you want to listen to everything he says and you know that it's coming from like it's actually coming from him in there rather than just some bullshit that he's spewing together. But yeah.
Starts making more and more dungeon. And every time he turns his work in, his boss Jeff Kaplan tells him to go bigger. The exact words were, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a dungeon that's too big. When in doubt, make it bigger." So he ends up adding more and more. Just look at these screenshots of the iterations of what he did. And then in a Reddit AMA, he points out that Wailing Caverns actually had way more stuff that eventually got cut, including mazes and all sorts of stuff.
Ooh, that's cool.
Recently, I played WoW Hardcore, had the absolute best time, and died.
Yep.
It's over.
But during that run, I got to do Wailing Caverns again. Now, I've done Wailing Caverns probably 50 to 60 times over my course of playing WoW, and I still get lost in there. Jeff, no, dungeons can be too big. So my team did some digging and went back over all the dungeons that have existed in MMOs for a long, long time. On average, back in like the early 2000s, it would take something like 40 minutes to an hour to do a dungeon on average. And the theory that we found after doing some research was that players would intentionally be taking breaks during these dungeons. That was the design idea. And then they would come back later to finish up, Or it was intended that they just wouldn't finish the dungeon every time they went to do it. Why do you think that Alderman
Wow.
has 2 entrances? That's why. They expect you to go in, spend a good portion of your day in there, come out, go for lunch, then come back and regroup later and finish it up. Or just stop halfway.
What do you think about that, chat? Like, that's... I couldn't imagine doing that in 2023. Like, that's not something you do in 2023. Maybe like... Yeah, in the early 2000s, sure. But in the modern game, like, I don't know, in the modern game, that just seems really... It depends what you're doing as well. Like, if you're doing Mythic Plus, you want Mythic... For me, I don't think Mythic Plus dungeons, because you started the segment by saying, you know, how long should dungeons be, and yada yada. For me, a Mythic Plus, like some kind of ranked system dungeon, whether it be Mythic Plus or Criterion or whatever it is, shouldn't be more than, like, max are like, I think 28 minutes. I think on the lower end, 22 minutes. It's got to be at least 22. Beyond, so anywhere between the 22 to 28 minute mark, I think is good. Anything less than that, it's a bit too quick. Anything over that, you're just sort of, you start to fatigue and like in your focus, and you're just you're reducing the chance of success based on the level of concentration you have to have over that length of time, right? If that sort of makes sense. But yeah, that would be really weird now. Imagine just stopping mid-dungeon and going and taking a little lunch break, you know? Same could be said for FF14 players. We're getting older. Yeah, I mean, MMO gamers are getting older. That's for sure. Not enough fresh blood coming in. Yeah, this was back when WoW was an RPG. Yeah.
Not just WoW either, right? Let's look at other games. Guild Wars 2 had a lot of the same devs that worked on early WoW go over there to make it, and they did the same again. That's what they knew. Big, sprawling 40-minute dungeons, but they had a new idea to go with it, right? Every dungeon would have multiple pathways through it. Let me give you this map of the Ascalonian Catacombs. As you can see, you just go left, you go right, you go down, then you go up, and then you come around, and then you circle up and you go there, and that's one run. But then you can go right, you can turn around, and then you can come back up through the pathway, and then you can go up there, and then you get a second run out of it. But if you want to do another one, you can do that too. You can come back round and go up there, and then you can circle back round to yourself, but cross over the path of the first one. Of course you're going to do that. And then you finish up on the third dungeon. You got lost? I gave you a map. But of course, as with all things, time changes, and they started to get player feedback. And shockingly, it turned out, and
people didn't like it.
You won't. Players didn't like spending 3 or 4 hours getting a group together, to go to a dungeon, to not finish it, and to get lost. And they also didn't like going down to a dungeon and just hanging around hoping people would show up to get a group. Weird. So it was time for a change, and they sat down and they got their heads together to
That's the thing as well, is like the time it takes to actually form the group for the dungeon needs to be considered in executing the dungeon. If it takes you an hour to form a group, and then you got to run there, and then you form the group, you run there, you start the dungeon, and then the dungeon itself takes 2 hours, like, bro, you want to do like one dungeon, it's gonna take you 4 hours? No way, man. Like when I go do Dead Mines runs, Dead Mines is supposed to be it's a early entry level dungeon. It should be quick. Dead Mines takes like 2 hours for one dungeon. It just takes crazy amounts of time, and in the modern world, it's just too long, you know.
And make their audience feel better, because it turned out not everybody playing games was capable of gaming for 16 plus hours a day, which were the people who made these games. So they had to design them for that wider audience, and you'll see that. The best example you'll see is like Diamol and Scarlet Monastery, which came later. They were then still big giant dungeons, but broken up into nice 20 to 30 minute sections.
Yeah.
You could go down and do the whole thing, sure, but you could also just go Diamol East, Diamol West, Scarlet Library, etc, etc, etc. Gone were those twisty, windy corridors and mazes. Now we were pretty linear. And gone were those big precipices where little Joey on a bad day fumbled his controller and fell down into a hole.
No, not the Whirling Caverns jump!
And what we had now was nice simple chunks. By Wrath of the Lich King, most dungeons have been reduced to just 20-minute runs, nice and simple. There were a couple of extras, sure, like Arnket the Old Kingdom. Doing that whole place is a good 40-minute run if you do the optional bosses. And we always do the optional bosses, don't we?
Is the Old Kingdom for... Oh, yeah, because because you can go straight to the end boss, or you can do the, the Orc caster woman, and then you can also go down and do the Mushroom Lad. Yeah. So I guess I think that's a cool thing way of looking at dungeons is like you can have one instance dungeon with optional bosses and you can skip those and you can just go to the end boss. That's cool too. And it's 5 minutes with a mage and a warlock? Exactly.
Don't we?
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Like Arnket the Old Kingdom. Doing that whole place is a good 40-minute run if you do the optional bosses. And we always do the optional bosses, don't we? Now, I've talked mainly about WoW, but all the games did this. Let's go over to the Weeb camp. By Stormblood in Final Fantasy XIV, they found the
Oh my god, spoilers, guys. I know there's a moth in the
formula that worked best for them. And since that point, every single dungeon has been almost identical in flow. Now, their dungeons are all very story-focused. Loot is a very secondary concern, so the gameplay is formulaic to tell a story in the best way. It has a straight pathway, a new biome after each boss, and a pretty set 20-minute completion time for the average group. Literally,
I think that's good.
every single dungeon since then until now has followed this exact formula.
So since what expansion? Sorry, you say Stormblood. That's good, because this is not the case in, like, ARR. You go into ARR dungeons, and you don't get a new biome after each boss, and some of them take a bit longer, depending on which difficulty you do them on. If you do midnight level no echo and stuff, I mean, fair or serious, bro. That took me, like, 3 hours. But that's, yeah, I think that's a good look, then, for some of these later dungeons that are coming up. 2 packs of mobs, wall-to-wall. Hey, CC Lemon, stop spamming the chat, bro. 2 packs of mobs, wall, 2 packs of mobs, boss. Yeah. Cool, but I mean, the intent of telling the story and getting different, like, biomes and stuff, that's pretty cool. Makes me think of my classic WoW friend who was dead set on FF not being enough of an MMO because you don't manually form parties and you don't travel to the dungeon. Some people have really weird reasons why they don't do things, or why they do things. It is what it is, you know. ARR and Heaven's Ward were experimentations. Stormblood is where PvE took its final form. Yeah, cool. Alright, interesting. Okay.
By design, Yoshi P, hallowed be his name, Yoshi P had an interview with Famitsu where he talked about dungeon design specifically. Yoshi P said, in the first place, the dungeons in FF14, with the exception of some early dungeons, are basically a single path. Now, I can get my hands on the dungeons I made in the early days, and no longer do I get lost. The reason for this is that in order to easily play multiplayer without wasting a lot of time, side paths are unnecessary. And even if they were provided, players would only be able to take the optimal route. For the Guild Wars 2 guys, they did exactly the same thing. They entirely removed their dungeon system.
So I think that depends on what kind of content you're doing. Like, FF doesn't have Mythic Plus, so linear dungeons make sense in FF. But in WoW, linear dungeons are actually, in my opinion, some of the worst, like, so oftentimes are the most boring dungeons. Because you want variety in where you're getting your trash from and what route you want to go and optimizations there. So it depends what kind of dungeons your game has as well. Not all dungeons are equal, you know. Some dungeons are Mythic Plus, some dungeons are story driven, some, you know, etc., etc. But yeah.
And replaced it with a new system that suited their player base called Fractals. These were 10 to 20 minute drop in, drop out, fast played content. Now, the 20-minute stuff is kind of the really hard stuff. Everything else, 10 minutes, in and out, easy fun. Elder Scrolls Online, exactly the same thing again. They made all their dungeons that sweet 20-minute mark.
Well, what is this
I don't
POV?
get it, right? It's like they all got together. They put on their hoods, they sat around the MMO Cabal table, and they all universally decided that for a multiplayer game, 20 minutes is the exact amount of time it should take.
Yeah, 20 minutes I think is a good point. Like 15 to 20 minutes is a good point if you're just doing normal dungeons. If you're doing any kind of like challenge mode stuff, depending on the challenge mode element of it, it should be, I think 22 to 28 is a good point. Did you hear everyone's favorite British person, James Corden, was the main star of Bobby's company party? Yeah, I heard there was some Activision thing and they brought in James Corden to, like, you know, get some of the employees, like, happy or something. I mean, bruh. That would be my nightmare, meeting James Corden. Jesus. Agree, I'd argue Mythic Plus is a separate conversation, though. I would call them dungeons in the traditional sense, but it does matter on dungeon design for WoW. Yeah, for sure. I think 20 minutes is a good amount of time. Then again, I look at, like, WoW's old dungeons, like BRD and stuff like that, and those, like, BRD was one of the best dungeons of like, ever. It was incredible. But 10 p.m. it's a school night, and you're like, oh, I want to do a dungeon, and it's like, oh, well, okay, I can't do a BRD run because I'm going to be here until 2 or 3 a.m. So, yeah, you still have people doing skips. Well, that's the whole point, right? Is in BRD, it's sort of like that Guild Wars 2 dungeon that he showed a second ago, where you can go a bunch of different routes. People normally in BRD, they either do arena runs, or they do emp runs, or they do, like other... I don't know. You can go different routes through it, so you can specifically try and target different things. You can do like a full quest run. You do emp run. You do arena runs. There's some other stuff as well. Blackrock Depths. Yeah, Blackrock Depths is a D&D dungeon for sure. Yeah, hands down. Yeah.
I did a little Twitter poll. 20 minutes. Everybody said the same thing. Anything longer than 20 minutes?
Yo! Oh!
Same thing. Anything long?
Yo, it's me! Come on, Preach. Where's my credit in the video, bro? Look, he even starts the thing with... Oh, man. Thanks, Preach. I put 25 to 28 minute mark. Everything should matter. If trash exists, let it feel impactful, dangerous, enjoyable. Trash should allude to boss mechanics, optional routing, and the best dungeons are always the most thematic. Shrine of the Storms, Dawn of the Infinites. I like puzzles, environmental things. Yeah, this is my sort of thing on the thing is like... Trash should allude to the boss mechanics. So the trash should set you up for the boss that's coming up. You should know what the boss is going to do because you paid attention to that trash. And then when you kill that boss, the next trash should allude to the next boss's stuff. I think, yeah, 25, 28 minute mark. Yeah, cool. Optional routing. Again, it depends. Like, again, it's hard to say because it's like, in my head, I'm sort of thinking Mythic Plus, but then if I'm just thinking normal. Oh, yeah, put allude. Oh, grow up with... Shut up, Brat Simpson. You didn't even spell Simpson right, okay? Why don't you focus on your own name first before you come at me with the spelling, all right,
Longer
buddy?
than 20 minutes starts to be a hassle for people. It takes too long to set up, too long to do, and they have other things to get on with, so they have to book an evening. Too short, and it becomes like More of Souls in Legion, where people just storm through it and they don't care about the dungeon whatsoever. No story, no fun. Oh, but Preacher... World of Warcraft does have non-linear dungeons. Have you never seen the MDI? Lots of different routes and pathways. Yeah, of course I have. Taylor Sanders, the WoW encounter designer, actually brought this up super recently. In that, he describes that they add non-linearity to World of Warcraft dungeons just to keep it a little spicy, but remember, through Mythic Plus and their affixes, they're able to force players to take different routes rather than the optimal route. But realistically, it's just new optimal routes.
For each new season, we like to have a mix of dungeons that are more linear, but also mix that up with dungeons that are more open, like Atal Dazar.
Yeah, Atal Dazar, for example, you do that dungeon based on the affix week. If it's like a tyrannical week, you want to get to the boss quickly for your bloodlust. If it's like a fort week, you might do a different route where you do a boss that you don't need the bloodlust for because you don't care about it, and then you go big with trash, and then you blood. So like that'll affect your route too. It's just the affix week, yeah.
Manner in a way to try to keep some variety in there, and players who enjoy routing can have some options to really like sink their teeth into.
You guys know by now, Mythic Plus changed the way dungeons work. They made them into a pure go efficient way of doing things. But that also removed all the sense of exploration and adventure, and that has consequences. Let's look at Uldaman, for example, right? In 2004, it had all that sense of wonder and adventure that you would come to know from like an original Zelda title. You would go and defeat the dwarves, connect the 3 pieces of the staff, plant it into a scale model of the city, and then bright shining lights would come through it, glaring onto the door, and then the maiden would come stomping through to try and destroy you. Recently, Uldaman was remade. All that is gone in terms of efficiency. All to give that go prospect the credit it deserves in Mythic Plus, but as a dungeon, it's lost a lot of things. And this has been a ripple effect across many games. So what would you prefer? Would you like that streamlined, linear experience, or would you want that sense of exploration and wonder? I imagine your first impression is, yeah, I want to explore, but not if I have to repeat it every single week. But for sure, I do miss that sense of wonder and excitement, those hold your breath moments that I look forward to every single week where I turn the UI off and watch what's going on. And I absolutely definitely prefer that to planning out a route in an add-on before we even step inside.
That's a hard one though, because Like, that's a hard one. Because, yeah, you're going to use the add-on, you're going to have the route pre-constructed. You don't want the RP stuff when you're doing high-level content. But, yeah, it definitely removes some of the sort of the excitement and stuff from the dungeon. But then the excitement then is replaced by, oh, did we time it, you know? Question about WoW dungeons: are they meant to be a one-time experience, or are they meant it to be farmed? All the depth sounds cool, but not if I have to keep doing it every day. It depends. Generally speaking, WoW's dungeons supposed to be repeated a lot. Yeah.
I'm afraid this group is full, laddie. Better look next time.
Yeah, the new Mega Dungeon's awesome. It's got tons of character to it.
Travelers. Okay, we're gonna do a dungeon then. But that involves one of the biggest nightmares of all time. Other people. Honestly, finding other people for a dungeon can be really rough. Of course, in World of Warcraft, you're going to need a full job history, the bank statements for the last 6 years, and proof of identity of your mother's shoes before you're going to be invited into a group. In other games, it's like LFG and auto matchmaking that makes it work, which
Yes!
most people
Final
prefer,
Fantasy!
but not always. I mentioned earlier that in EverQuest, dungeons were these outdoor, non-instance, sprawling areas, and that Wailing Cavern's first design turned out to not be a dungeon at all, but a waiting area. So get this. Back in the day, the developers really thought what players wanted to do was head down to a dungeon and then just hang around, kill stuff, and then hope and pray that someone would just show up and they would.
They
kind of
do that. People do that a bit.
A tank, a healer, 3 DPS would also show up so that you could go off and eventually do your dungeon. And it's why they created all those outdoor areas just full of mobs to kill. And you know what? Some players just didn't like that. This is why, right? All them old school dungeons, your Black Fathom Dapes, your BRDs, your Wailing Caverns, your Ultimans, they all have these like weird outdoor areas that are just full of mobs because they intended you to just go down there and grind until people showed up. You've got to remember something here. Up until very close to World of Warcraft's release, quests weren't designed to give experience. They were just breadcrumbs to take you to somewhere else. It was only recently that they decided that maybe just grinding enemies wasn't the way you should level in MMOs.
Yeah, horrendous.
It's not actually until the World of Warcraft beta opened that they got all this feedback, and the devs were genuinely surprised and shocked that people didn't enjoy this. In Wrath of the Lich King, they came up with the LFD system, but darkness fell on the world. Because you suddenly realized that all those players you see running around nearby, well, they might not be as good as you are.
Bro, I like feel sick right now. I feel sick right now. Like the desk is shaking, the shoes are on, the monitors and shit, like the things buckling. Like, ugh.
This is really tough to solve and has been plaguing several games for years. The fact is, right, players have a wildly different ability level. Random matchmaking is really only useful if the thing you are queuing into is pretty basic. Once the difficulty goes up, just pairing up anyone who is capable of clicking the join queue button just...
Bro, do they even have 5 players? I only see 4 players. Yeah, I only see 4 players in the group. He's in a +6 as 4 people. Bro. Preach, what's going on, buddy? Where's your 5th?
Matchmaking is really only useful if the thing you are queuing
Look closer. I'm looking at the DPS Mia. There's only 4 people on it. Played FF too much. Yeah. That was a 4-man. No, they have a tank, they have a prop paladin, they have a ret paladin, an enhancement, and then Preach on the resto. But there's only 4 people on the DPS Mia. Yeah, I don't know.
Is pretty basic. Once the difficulty goes up, just pairing up anyone who is capable of clicking the join queue button just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft's Cataclysm saw the effects of this. Wrath dungeons were too easy, so they tried to bring some difficulty back, and it just didn't work. The success rate was so low that people left the game, and Blizzard had to nerf them all. Other games saw this and made their queuable content so easy and matchmaking for harder stuff, but of course, it's back again. Consequences. All the other games, they just kept it simple. They had a distinct gap between the normal and pretty rewarding system that was the queuable content, and then the prestige of the harder matchmaking content with just no in between. FF14, for example, recently introduced the variant dungeons, after of course all the hordes of Western players yearned for harder dungeon content. Their solution was an extremely...
Wait, was that Total Biscuit? Oh, Total Hobnob. Oh, yeah, it is.
For example, recently introduced the variant dungeons, after of course all the hordes of Western players yearned for harder dungeon content. Their solution was an extremely easy explorer mode with a great twist. The outcomes of the dungeon had many possibilities depending on what the player did during the run. It created a wonderful puzzle to solve with hidden bosses, etc. for them to find. But then, 2 hard modes that very quickly gave seasoned players a wall to climb in a smaller 4-man environment. Guild Wars 2 added a gearing system called Agony that actively time-gated players from...
Oh, is that Raven? Yeah, Raven shows on the stream sometimes, huh? Yo, Raven Rib. Nice.
Agony that actively time-gated players from climbing the ranks of fractals until they had clearly tested their mettle in the earlier content. I personally think most players would prefer every single piece of content to be queuable and to suit their personal schedules and lifestyle, but the reality is that in practice, it just doesn't work. I find if you aren't someone who enjoys joining a regular group or a guild, then FF14's system is the best, but ultimately, match-made systems in MMOs are going to be less rewarding than setup groups, and if they weren't, they would kill a huge part of the game for many players as the content would have to be so easy. Dungeons are expected, and they're an exciting part of any...
Yeah, I think it depends on what you do. So, like, in FF, I think that's fine. I think the content, like, the dungeon should be... Like, I've been doing ARR, MSQ and stuff, and I've been going, like, oh, man, this is so easy to do this, so easy to do that. And it's like, well, yeah, of course it's easy, because every single player that plays that game needs to be able to do it. That's the bar. That's where the bar's at. So, of course, that should be easy. That's fine. It would be better if there was like a toggleable thing in, like, say, the MSQ, for example, where you could be like, oh, I want to do this boss on hard mode. Okay, sure. But in terms of dungeons, I've been doing the optional dungeons, and yeah, they had a little bit of challenge here and there, and I guess they're optional, so that's why they're a little bit more challenging, but nothing crazy. Like, and especially the first time you see it, then you're never going to fail that mechanic ever again, because it's easy once you know what to do. So, yeah, I think... By the way, what's Preach getting ready to say right now? He looks like he's ready to say something. Yeah, I think you could do, say, in WoW, for example, you could do a solo queue sort of thing, or like a instant queue Mythic Plus system on low-level content. I think that would be fine. Stuff where it doesn't matter who you get. But yeah, there's also Extreme, Savage, and Ultimates in FF, exactly. And when you do those, yeah, you can pick and choose where the challenge should be for you as a player.
Especially in MMOs. So think about what is best, especially with everything we've seen today, with all the devs and their opinions and what they created and what they had to change. I took to Twitter to find out what you guys think is perfect. I got a ton of responses, and the answers were almost universal. Players want large, epic, grand dungeons that they can go to, be fully immersed in, and adventure through with a story to tell afterwards. But they don't want to farm them like that. They want non-linear, interesting environments with choices to make and coordination, but no longer than 20 minutes. Players want interesting trash with crowd control, interrupts, solid teamwork and gameplay, while still being able to do enormous AoE damage and blast everything to death. So with all that in mind, what is the best dungeon ever made?
Well, my personal favorite dungeon that I've ever done was Eye of Ashara.
Halls of Reflection. Stratholm.
Hold on. Let me...
What is the best dungeon ever made?
Well, my personal favorite dungeon that I've ever done was Eye of Ashara.
Eye of Ashara. Eye of Ashara had problems, bro. The seagulls? I don't know. Eye of Ashara there's some good stuff there.
Halls of Reflection.
Halls of Reflection? I don't know if that's FF or WoW, I'll be honest. I'm pretty sure there's like 18 different halls dungeons in WoW. I don't know. Is that an FF dungeon? Sounds like an FF dungeon.
Stratholm.
Oh. No, maybe... Wait, is Halls of Reflection in the current one? Not FF, it's in Wrath? Halls of Reflection. Oh, I don't remember what that dungeon looked like. And then, Stratholm? Stratholm was good, yes. I'll take that. I'll take Stratholm. One of the Lich King right, okay. I've probably not done it much if it was an ICC dungeon. Okay. Yeah, Stratholm I think is good. Okay, what about Nagura?
Right, my favorite dungeon is Halls of Valor.
Get the hell out, Nagura. Come on.
Favorite dungeon is Shadowfang Keep.
My all-time
Shadowfang Keep. The level 20 dungeon? Scribe, what? Scribe, you're one of the best players in the world, bro. What do you mean, Shadowfang Keep? Did you meet your wife there or something? Like, what do you mean?
favorite dungeon is Cathedral of Eternal Night.
Cathedral of Eternal Night. Interesting one, I think, to have as, like, a favorite. I think it's a decent dungeon. Okay. By the way, guys, Preach didn't get me to feature in this video. Just saying. Okay? Just saying. He didn't ask me. Because I would have said Shrine of the Storms. So.
I'm going to go with the Feeder of Pain.
Theater of Pain. Okay, THD is cursed.
From Final Fantasy 14.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah,
what?
yeah, that's...
Wait, hold on. Which one?
From Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy.
Valor.
Hold on.
My favorite dungeon is Shadowfang Keep.
My all-time favorite dungeon is Cathedral of Eternal Night.
I'm going to go with the Feeder of Pain.
Amarot from Final.
I don't know what she said. Averot? Averword? Don't know what that is. FF14? Amazing.
Fantasy 14.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's gonna be, Waycrest Manor.
I'll take Waycrest Mana. I mean, it's unique.
100% it's gotta be VC.
VC is Dead Minds, isn't it? Okay. Classic, you know, classic WoW player. Well, yeah, classic WoW player. Double classic WoW player. Hilarious, dude. And I'll just take the first dungeon in classic WoW. That'll do. Nah, Dead Minds is a really good one. Dead Minds is a really good one.
My favorite dungeon is Mount Golg.
Hazavesh?
Mount Golg? Okay. Don't know what that is.
Solia's Gambit.
My favorite.
Soleil's Gambit? Oh, that's that's just Gambit. And well, yeah, Gambit's a fantastic dungeon. Okay.
Favorite dungeon is Halls of Reflection.
Hi, I'm Dratnos.
From ICC. Okay, we got 2 for that. Okay, interesting.
And my favorite dungeon is Tazavesh, the Veiled Market.
Veiled Market. Veiled Market is good. I think Gambit's better, though.
Stormstout Brewery.
Brewery from MOP. That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, yeah, interesting.
I have like a favorite dungeon, but I have like favorites. And I think it's the Vault.
As you guys
The Vault. I'm assuming that's from FF. Okay.
can see, everybody has a different answer. Everybody wants something slightly different, which of course makes it super difficult for the people behind the scenes to make something that appeases everybody. And the fact is, it can't happen.
What's interesting is seeing the WoW players that have come to play FF. Some of them, like OKMage, for example, said their favorite dungeon is an FF dungeon, not a WoW dungeon. That's interesting.
But having said that, what do I think is the quintessential MMO dungeon? My actual pinnacle of MMO dungeon design? Well, it goes old school. It's the Dead Mines in World of Warcraft. The Dead Mines, for me, represents everything good about an adventure in a dungeon that is also repeatable and farmable and gets me excited every single time I get to go there. There is so much story going on through the different environments you go on, to that grand opening into the Archway, and seeing that ship down in the cove waiting to be attacked. We have big moments like Mr. Smite running at you with his hammer.
You there, check out that noise!
Cannon to blow the doors off. The Goblin lurking in his foundry. And then, of course, to top it all, Van Cleef waiting for us. And then even after that, we get some extras. We see Cookie running around on the bottom for so a little bit of
get a little
extra
bonus.
loot. And every time I think about it, it's a perfect amount of time. Every single thing is put in with such care and detail and attention. And I struggle to think despite the amazing dungeons that I've visited over the last few years, for something that I think about as regularly as the Dead Mines, and when it comes up, everything about it makes me smile. Of course, we have ignored one aspect of dungeons that is...
Hold on, before he talks about that. Yeah, Dead Mines, I think, is a fantastic dungeon. It hits you at a certain point in the story. Like, my first time going into Dead Mines, where I first realized that dungeons exist, because Alliance was my first character. So when I first realized that the Dead Mines existed, after having I probably played the game for like 40, 50, 60 hours before I ever got to the Dead Mines. Like, hours and hours and hours. And I got to Dead Mines and was like, holy schmoly, this thing is... Now there's this? It's really thematic. Even when I go play, say, like, hardcore classic now, or even just classic, and I go play it, and I get to Dead Mines, it's like running through Westfall, and you get to a little town, I can't remember what it's called, Moon something. You get to a little town, and then there's all the Defias hanging around, and everyone's killing stuff, because, you know, other people are forming their groups, and it's just, like, a super exciting time, and then you get into and then you, like, travel through, get to the dungeon entrance, go through, bunch of different variation, good story to it, yeah, I like it. Isn't the favorite dungeon is whichever you cleared with the highest key? No. You can clear a high-level dungeon and not enjoy it.
Is pretty important. And that is them shinies.
The loot, baby. What the hell is that? Is it the rat?
Thank you so much for coming along on this adventure with us. This video was something that has been burning in our minds for ages to look at all the dungeons, especially after a project MMO, and frankly, we love making them. As you've seen on YouTube, we have changed direction a little bit. Our focus is primarily on these big legacy-style videos. It's what
I like
we're
this.
known for. It's what you guys loved in the past. And
These are my favorite Preach videos. You know, these are the ones I will always set time aside to watch, you know.
It's what we want to do. So if you want to support us a little bit more than hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell, you can head over to our website where you can help support us and get access to behind the scenes footage and all that kind of stuff. So thank you again, guys, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Outtakes. Oh god. Oh god. Bro, that desk, man, it's shaking so much.
Too much?
Do a couple of... Yeah, how many takes do you want?
Got it.
That's really funny. Oh, I like his camera. Oh, that's good. I should do that. Hold on, that's really good. Because my I need that. Then you guys could be like right here, you know? You'd be like right here. Be nice. The shoes on inside, I know. Oh! Mouse on the monitor, dude.
Just ultimate sadness. You gonna keep moving around while I'm shooting? Are you? You can tell me.
The dog actually looks at Preach the way my friend Dylan looks at me.
You give me the stink eye?
Dylan doesn't do that to me, though.
You're a good boy.
Nice. Yeah, I like that video. I gave it a little thumbs up. I linked it earlier. Yeah, I like that video. I think it's a good discussion point. It was cool, obviously, as well, seeing a bunch of different streamers like give their favorite dungeons and stuff as well. My favorite dungeon is Shrine of the Storms. That's my favorite dungeon. I think it was expansive. You had a bunch of different options in the route that you went. It was very thematic. The story of it was really cool. I just love being in there every single time. It allowed for a lot of skill expression. You could do some really cool stuff with snaps and routing. And yeah, I really love Shrine. It's favorite dungeon. Favorite dungeon hands down. Isn't there a dungeon in DF where you go to an alternate Murloc timeline? There's Dawn of the Infinites, which is a new dungeon that they added in Dragonflight. And yeah, it's playing around with different time stuff. Yeah. But that was cool. That was interesting. Good to see some opinions on like different dungeon design. There's so many things that you have to take into account though, you know? So it's like, what kind of content does your game have, period? And then, you know, what kind of dungeons are optimal depends on those things, you know?